Okay, ladies and gentlemen, to bring the meeting to order. Okay, so welcome to Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting for the 19th. As we do the preamble again, the role of the Overview and Scrutiny is to provide independent, critical friend challenge and to work with the Council's executive and the other public service providers for the benefit of the public. The committee considers submissions from a range of sources and reaches conclusions based on the weight of evidence and not on party political grounds. So if I may ask, are there any apologies for this evening?
Apologies from Pauline Jorgensen, Chair, and Shahid Yunis is a sub, but he's joining us on Teams.
Thank you, Shahid. You just just let us know that you're actually online, you can hear us okay?
Yes, I can, Chairman. I can hear you loud and clear.
So the minutes of the previous meeting, are there any observations about the minutes? Are they, in anybody's view, correct? Have a vote, proposer for the minutes, please. Thank you, Laura. Seconder? Charles. And those in favour? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Any public questions?
No public questions and no member questions, Chair.
That takes us to the main item of the evening, the MTPF. Scrutinise the revenue and capital bids for the children's services and adults services. Prue, would you like to introduce it? Thank you.
I can do the introduction of the children's bits and then David can do the introduction of the adults bits. So it won't be any surprise to any of you to know that it's a very challenging year for children's services. Councils up and down the country are saying that they are severely financially challenged, and one of the main causes of that is the demand pressure and the cost pressures in children's services. And we are not exempt from that. As you will see if you've read the papers, there is cost pressure, there's complexity, additional complexity, there's additional demand, and there's home to school transport, which, as those of you who've been councillors for a while will know, has traditionally overspent. This year we've put more money in the budget for it, and I think we are more comfortable that we understand it. A lot of work has gone on, as you will all know, on the send side of children's services because of safety valve, and as part of that we have developed far more management information, which has enabled us to do better forecasting of the spend that's likely on send transport, which is where the pressure comes. So there's a very large increase in that budget, which we can't do anything about really until we develop more of our own local provision. So it's a difficult time. We are fairly confident in our numbers, but the numbers are obviously up, shall we say. So happy to answer any questions. There is a sort of presentation in your paperwork to explain where we are. I'll now hand over to David to just have a quick intro on adults.
Thank you, David.
As Prue has said, the financial position also for adult services is very challenging. Many councils, like the children's services, find the cost of statutory adult services far outweighs any funding the government deems to provide. Indeed, as we can see in the figures, over half the extra funding for adult services has been taken by inflation. And when you look at growth against savings, there's a very small real growth for adult services, despite the increasing numbers and complexity of the cases being seen. And I just want to thank Matt and his team for putting together this budget, because it wasn't easy. And I think they've done a very good job in putting this together and making it balanced. And the pressures on the budget don't only come from inflation. The increase in the minimum wage is great to see for the many people who employed in social care and very low paid people employed in social care. But the government rightly does this and increases it by almost 10%, but then doesn't provide any extra money for people like social care who need to provide that to the people who work for it. And as wages are over 70% of the social care budget, and many of those people are low paid staff especially, I'll cheer again for this increase in the minimum wage, but ask, where's it coming from for people who are so strapped, like our adult services? Another cost pressure I'd like to earmark is the NHS, who, despite being looked after really in the last 10 years far better than local authorities, are facing cost pressures now and finding it very difficult. And this impacts on adult social care, as many people supported by adult care or leaving hospital have both medical and social needs. And it's getting ever harder to get the NHS to pay what they should on the medical needs, and certainly finding any money from them for cases that we're already paying for but shouldn't be is nigh on impossible. So there are quite a few, yes, hard things happening with adult care. I've also looked at the capital spend, because I hope we all realise that capital spend isn't just because these things would be a nice idea. They are all invest to save, and that is the basic premise that capital is made of. So we invest in accommodation for the people who we serve, and that brings it into the local authority, which is obviously going to be cheaper. We have better control. Probably, well, we do pay less, but probably a better and certainly as good a service. And we can make our investment in appropriate places and not have to find things that almost fit but not quite, and so on. So we can do that. And there's also, it looks an awful lot of money spending on an alarm system, £300,000. But again, that will pay for itself within 7 years. It will mean that we can have less people on call, on working, and it means that we're providing a better service. So hopefully it will make our rating better as well. So there's things like that that we have to do and we are doing. So I'm not sure, do you want to say anything, or are we going to have questions?
Matt, have you anything to add to the conversation at the moment?
Sorry, I did exactly what you did.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, I don't think I'll repeat what Prue and David have said. We'll move to questions, and I think things will kind of come out through that process.
So, I would like to open up to questions, but if any comments before we start, any questions, for any comments on content within the MTPF that's been presented to us? No. So if anybody got any questions that you'd like to ask? Alistair.
Well, yeah, we're just looking at, is it CSR 10? It gives us the number of EHCP.
Sorry, Alistair, could you quote a page number, please, if there is one?
Let's say R10, page 42. Is it? I mean, an increase in 5 years of 95% from 800 odd to 1600 odd. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, it just seems, you know, I mean, this isn't in proportion to the population, and it can't be anything to do with the population. It must be something to do with the process, isn't it?
Yes and no. It is a national thing, so everybody's seen similar increases. It's climbing rapidly. Some of it is to do with being better able to spot people and then putting them through the process. Some of it is to do with the results of COVID affecting children. So we've got far more children now at a much younger age getting EHCPs because they weren't, you've got 4 and 5 year olds who weren't socialised during COVID and then have severe speech and language difficulties, which we hope we will get them out of as they grow older through putting the support in early. But it's a national thing, and this is why we've got safety valve, because the HCPs are going up like this, and we are doing what you would it makes sense to try and intervene earlier to prevent the escalation, to bring the number of EHCPs that we're predicting down over the next, well, there's 5.5 years left of safety valve. And that's the aim, but this is where all authorities are, rapid escalation. I don't know if Matt wants to add something.
Well, just to say, there was a national policy change several years ago which made it in some ways quite rightly easier to get EHCP planned, so and also to access the support. But what that meant was they're all over the country, including in Wokingham, there was lots of suppressed demand that's come through. That's why we've seen that escalation, and then in future that will in future years that will tail off. We predict. The problem with that is there isn't the funding to match that escalation to deliver those services, and also it needs a response across the local authority, education and health to support those children in ways that mean they don't need more expensive methods of supporting them as well. So there's some kind of demand management stuff to do in that as well. That's why you see those numbers escalating.
Norman, thanks.
I guess my first question was really on that same item. I mean, the escalation in costs associated with that is quite dramatic, to put it mildly. I just wondered, what we can realistically do to try and get that more under control in terms of sending people to special educational needs. That's the first question. The second part, maybe I'll stop there and I'll come back to the second.
So this is what safety valve is about. So this has been through Andrew's committee, sitting at the back. We are very underfunded on the SEND side, like every local authority, but we're particularly suffering. So we are one of 34 authorities that has a safety valve agreement. There's another 5 in the pipeline, which includes Bracknell. They're now coming in the next wave. And that is aimed at trying to reduce everything about it. So pull it back. So if you look at having an EHCP and having an independent special school, for example, as the top end spend, to pull everything back. So we have more local provision, which is state schools, which is less expensive to run. We don't have the costs of the home to school transport, taking children a very long way away either, which is not good for them. And if we intervene earlier, we can reduce the number of EHCPs and therefore the number of children that go to special school. And we're also levering in things called resource bases and SEND units. So to try and keep children in mainstream schools, but giving them some support in those schools. So resource bases is in simplistic terms for children that spend most of their time in the mainstream school and need a bit of time in a separate unit. And then the SEND unit is if you need a bit more time in the SEND unit and a little less time in the mainstream school. So all that is part of our safety valve planning and our new SEND strategy, which is going. We've got 16 work streams in there to contain the costs, but also revolutionise the service, because there's an awful lot we can do to change it. And one of the main planks that will make a difference is when we get the 2 new SEND schools in 2026. When we have our own local provision, it won't solve the problem, because there will always be some children with very severe needs that will need really specialist help in usually found in an independent setting, because they specialise. But we should be able to help more children more locally, and that will help with the cost as well as be better for the children. So it's a kind of win-win on all sides, but we've got to get through to that point. So it's going to be quite tough over the next couple of years until we actually get those schools on stream. But we are making progress, and we have, as I say, 16 work streams in total, for everything from commissioning, looking at our commissioning costs, to getting health to pay a contribution towards things, to helping schools. Because one of the other problems with the increases is, while children are in a mainstream school, they can have alternative provision, so they don't stay in school the whole time. The school can commission something else for them to go to. And there are all sorts of those. One is run by Reading Football Club, for example. There's lots of people go to equine therapy. There's all sorts of things that happen, but those are quite expensive as well, and they're not terribly well organised at the moment. So one of our work streams is getting that provision more into more of a framework, so that schools can opt for things instead of having to go off and find things for themselves. And that way we can not only try to keep control of the costs, but we can also try and control the quality of the placements as well, and make sure they're safe and all those other things which we need to do. So it's a vast programme of stuff to try and pull it all back.
Are the schools generally being cooperative in trying to keep as many people in mainstream as possible? Because it felt a few years ago that there was an incentive for some mainstream schools to push difficult people out because it help their sort of grade average and things. Has that changed?
On the whole, they are pretty good. Our schools have an attitude which is about inclusion, so they are really trying to do that. Some are better at it than others, and I think probably the smaller the school is, the more difficult they find it to cope. So they need the support. So that's one of our work streams, is providing a centralised SEND support from the council to assist the schools with what they need to do at a fairly early stage. So we're trying to take account of all those kinds of things. But on the whole, they're pretty good.
And the education, health and care plans that kids have, do lots of them work their way through that and then go back into normal mainstream, or does that tend to follow them most of the way through their school career?
A lot of them do keep them for a long time, and traditionally we've not been that good at really digging into what's required. So there is a bit more rigour coming into the annual reviews now, but plans do cease. That's what they put it, the cessation of plans. So some children get to the end of their education and the plan then automatically stops. But there are children who move back, and we are hopeful that if we get better interventions and more rigour into the system, then we will be able to see more plans. But I don't want to frighten parents. We're not trying to get people off plans if they need them. We're actually trying to make sure that the plan is actually doing something for the child, because there have been too many occasions when a child is on the same plan, it doesn't change year from year, and it's not achieving anything for that child. So we actually need to have a bit more rigour in the system, which is what we're trying to do now.
Could I just interject? Is that because all that's right? I just from a practical point of view, the reason that growth bid looks so large, or part of the reason why that growth bid looks so large, is it was an area of overspend that we spent a lot of time investigating. So this is a budget correction, I suppose. That's also, and also your question, Norman, was, you know, what are you doing about those home to school transport costs as well? If you look at CSR 3, that's the corresponding savings against that grant, which is about 500k, which is about giving families personal budgets to make their own transport arrangements, working on independent travel training for children where that's appropriate, all those sorts of things. So it's just to kind of give that context.
I mean, all those things seem a good idea anyway, and trying to, you know, get kids into normal society, if you like.
Yeah.
Peter, next, please.
I'm just really kind of two questions here. First, initially, is one, how are we approaching this? Because it seems as though I thought we were going to talk about the high level summary and then ask questions on individual items, whereas at the moment we seem to be focused on CSR 10, whereas I've got a question on CSR 4. So I'm just wondering what the process is here. And then I do have a question.
It's my error in just opening it generally to the things that were on most people's minds. Do you want to take these then one at a time, go through each individual item and start with CSR 1? If there's any comments, so I take it that in that route then. So are there any comments on questions anybody wishes to place against CSR 1?
Sorry, I was just wondering if there was any high level question first of all before we actually delve into the detail.
I think from my point of view, the high level question would be, are we making as much savings as we possibly can? And generally looking at all of these, virtually all of them are amber, bar one red and one green. So I would say that in most cases, there is a certain amount of uncertainty as to whether or not these savings are going to be made. And I think that's a general thing. And in that respect, I have one question to put to that, is that there is an expectation of a government, if I get the right terminology, sorry, put that in there, the core grant funding from the government. And I understand that was released, or that information is available now. So do we have any indication as to whether or not that's meeting our expectations, or is it well below par?
I can start if that's all right. I suppose the local government finance settlement came out yesterday, didn't it? My understanding is there's nothing in there that is additional to what had already been announced. So in terms of our budgetary planning for this set of papers and wider across the council, there's no increase or upside to what we were planning already. And I think there's another session of this committee, isn't there, in January, where Graham will bring everything all back and we'll have an understanding of the settlement in more detail, because detail is coming out even as we speak. But there's certainly for children and adults, the demands on us in terms of inflation pressures and need more people, more children, more adults, more complexity far outweigh the available money in that settlement, which is why the savings, £4.1 million worth of savings across children and adults, are as high as they could possibly be, which is why I've rated them amber, because what we're trying to do, those savings proposals, in my view, are sensible efficiencies in that kind of context, I suppose, whilst trying to protect as much as we can all the service level that people are used to across children and adults. But it is incredibly difficult financial and need environment, and this is one of the most difficult budgets I've had to set since I've been here, and my confidence levels of whether we can stick to that and deliver all those savings are lower than they would normally be, which is why they're amber.
Thank you, Matt. Peter.
You asked my high level question.
So I would add a little comment to that. in that my understanding of what the figures are, it doesn't actually meet the requirement to pay the additional salaries because of the increase. So it's actually less than we're actually going to be paying out. So it actually doesn't help us much. So yes, it will be an interesting year. Charles.
Thank you. I have first a children's question, which is page 19 and page 21. There's a reference on here to page 19 for sixth form expansion, which comes to 1.25 million. And on page 21, I think I've lost the line now, but there's about three. There we are, right at the top. There's 3.5 million on there. I'm assuming that's Bohun School. Where is St Crispin's, or is that not featured in here?
That's not that right. So you're right. That's Bohun. That's spread over the 2 years, and that's what we've agreed with them, and is going forward. St Crispin's is in a different pot of money. So there's a secondary school pot, and £1 million is coming out of that for St Crispin's. There is a page for it somewhere. It's not a new thing. It's an existing one. So it's somewhere in that list somewhere. I'll find it somewhere. Secondary Basic Needs Programme, page 74. I think that's where it is.
Thank you. My second question was on adults, which is page 31. We've got a line item for older people's dementia home coming in at about 11.5 million. And immediately below it, we've got care home refurbishment for 1 million. And if you turn to the actual, I think it's page 86 and 87, the actual capital bid, the thing here talks about Toutley, however you pronounce it. I'd understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it wasn't certain that the council was actually going ahead with that. And the figure at the bottom of this, 12,991, is those two line items added together. So I just was seeking a little bit, and there's another figure on here of 14,116, just seeking a little bit of breakdown on what that all means.
Got me? So I think that the bids that you're the capital bids that you're talking about is money that's already in the capital programme. They're not new bids this year. So you must be looking at the summary there, because they're not new bids. The larger number, I haven't quite got the number in front of me that you read out before. It is for a new care home build. That's a carry forward, and that's earmarked for Toutley, as you said, or Toutley, Toutley. I think it's Toutley. We're still in the process of re-looking at a delivery model for that within the budget, and the decision on that will come back fairly shortly. The other 1.5 million is for the refurbishment of the care home that we purchased on the Barkham Road. So it was part of that business case. So not a new bid. That was all last year's bids that are there for reference.
Thank you. And the final one was David, I think, referred in his opening remarks to something Phil Cunnington asked about the last council, the money the NHS owes us. And I was just, obviously, I'm assuming that's not resolved from what you said, and I'm not saying it should be necessarily. Yeah, but I just was wondering if we could have an update on that, seeing as it's very relevant, that big sum of money, to these financial figures.
Working hard on it. You know more about it than me, but certainly we've got someone looking at that and so on, and trying to chase win situations which we know will win.
Yes, so there are revenue savings lines in children and adults, which is about getting more income through from health. I mean, it's quite a complicated arena, but essentially where people have health needs in the community, they need to access health fundings for that. The council and social care tends to be a safety net for people. So we tend to put in the care that people need. but we then need to have conversations with health about them, the health service meeting those needs, health needs in the community, Wokingham and every local authority and every ICS in the country, that those conversations can always be bones of contention. But our rates for health funding, continuing healthcare funding in Wokingham and Berkshire West are some of the lowest in the country, and that's where we are raising that issue and in active discussions, let's say, with our health partners about correcting that, because at times of financial stress, carrying those burdens that we shouldn't be financially doesn't work for our residents and certainly doesn't work for the council and council taxpayers.
Thank you, Marie-Louise. Oh, sorry. See?
We've moved on a bit, but I just wanted to put in a plea for engagement with parents, particularly around planned cessation, because this is understood and experienced by parents in a quite profoundly negative way. The struggle that people have gone through to gain the plan feels like a victory. It feels like a struggle which they finally won. Therefore, any adaptation or what's perceived as a reduction feels like a defeat. Yeah, and I think it is something that can be engaged with. Yeah, because I mean, we do have the same interests at heart, but it's just something that is of causes extreme anxiety, and perhaps not unnecessary anxiety sometimes. Sorry, I mean, I know you don't disagree.
No, I don't disagree. I think there are two things that I want to say about that. One is that part of what we are doing is writing a communication plan for how to communicate with parents of children with SEND, because we have not done it very well as a council. And that includes things like a newsletter that's going to go to all parents. I think it's termly, something like that we will get SEND Voices to help write the letters, because the letters are very council-y, shall I say, not very helpful. The head of SEND has been having meetings with groups of parents. We are engaged in all sorts of things to try and improve that communication, and then for the level of trust, which is very difficult, because exactly as you've described, all those parents have spent a long time. They think, because this is the way it has worked traditionally, is that they battled for an EHCP because they think that is the only way to lever in the help for their child. And what we are trying to move to is a model where that is the last thing that you need. You actually can lever in the help right at the beginning when they first need it, and they don't need to go to that extreme, we hope, because we will get the support in and give them the confidence that their child is being helped before they get to that point. Before we get to that stage, we're in the awkward stage at the moment where the parents don't have the confidence that they don't need an EHCP. We're at a very early stage with the SEND support more generally. So we're going to go through a bit of turbulence, I think, with the system, with parents, while they and us, we communicate together and try and find that place where they have more confidence that the system is going to deliver a better service for them. But it will come up, it's years. I mean, even before the SEND reforms that Matt referred to in 2014, when we had statements before we had EHCPs, it was always a battle. It will always be a battle because it's underfunded. But we are trying to actually change how we deliver everything. So it should be better, but I'm not going to promise it will be better immediately. But it is something we are very, very conscious of, because without the trust of parents, it's going to be very difficult to navigate the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, and I had a higher level question as well. When we were looking at risks in both of these, there's questions about market sustainability, both in accessing care for complex needs and in adult social care, particularly care for the elderly. And there it's like, it's not really so much of risk as a certainty, isn't it? And that the sense that we are, you know, building a house on the edge of a volcano, basically, because, you know, the whole of the, you know, the care home industry is quite possibly going to tip over. If you look at the levels of indebtedness, you know, the whole things that you know about as well. So I'm just asking about how you include, you know, advocacy on this larger scale of like things have to change structurally in order for anything to work in the future, you know, because the sort of like the structure of the sector at the moment is simply not delivering, and some of us might argue not capable of delivering, and very well, you know, might very well tip over. So are there ways in which we can engage on a level of actually trying to, you know, push the changes that we know need to happen? I know it's like, but that's a very wide top one.
I mean, I can answer. I mean, I completely agree. I think we all know adult social care is in a national crisis. Successive governments of all different persuasions have looked at how to solve that, but have always backed away from it, and we've had that again. And we are in a really difficult situation, particularly from a workforce and pay point of view. Large influx of overseas workers, which has been difficult to manage. Big turnover of staff, huge vacancy levels. Where even when you look at there's an eye-watering percentage of the social care workforce within 5 to 10 years of retirement age as well. It's a national problem that needs solving. I suppose what we have we've written successive letters and continue to lobby, and that's been with this administration, but started with Charles as well. He was lead member. We need to keep up the fight around that. You know, and personally, I think you know, social care needs to be looked at in terms of it being a key piece of the country's infrastructure. So people, you know, quite often it gets depicted in quite a negative way in the media, but this is about supporting people and families to live ordinary lives in the community, and that in itself brings economic productivity, carers that can work and want to work, and as well as helping our health services by keeping people well and out of hospital. So there needs to be a kind of shift in thinking about social care and a national solution.
Yeah, I mean, what Matt says is very true. We need a national solution. We can't do our own little thing and declare UDI. It's a national problem. But I'd also say we are trying to look at this problem and make sure that we are doing what we can. I don't know if you've heard of Social Care Futures, but that's something we're doing, which is helping to change not just workers, but everyone's perspective about working together rather than an us and them situation with people using social care. And it's something which is very close to my heart for many years. And it's something which I can see really blossoming. And yes, we haven't got the money to do all that we'd love to do with it, but at least we can try and start to make a difference and start to listen to people using social care and start to take their opinions much more seriously and start to realise that they have a voice, and often their voice is what they need. and it might be less than what we think they need, but if it is less, let's provide them with that, and if they need more, we can provide them with more later. But it's making sure that we value them and take their voice as serious, and that's what is really important. And I think there are ways like that which we are changing, but basically it's just a national situation. As I said, the pay for care workers is abysmal. It's great they're getting this rise, but then we're going to have to pay for it. How do we pay for it? So there's things like that, you know. So it's
absolutely, no, I completely agree. I was thinking more specifically, for example, about, you know, the likelihood that the provision of care homes is going to fall apart. Yeah. Because the market is simply not working. I mean, the care homes are carrying debts of like leakage of £19 in every 100 is going on interest. Yeah. These sorts of things are likely. And so sooner rather than later, it's quite possible that the thing is going to tip over. Yeah. And the care homes will simply not be able to run. And that I'm just asking if that's sort of like factored in as a risk, you know, I mean, or a certainty. Do you see what I mean?
So,
well, I mean, there are these large scale things and demographic issues as well, but there are specific things which are likely to bring to disaster sooner rather than later. But I mean, I know we're not going to have an answer here. It would be good to sort of see whether we can feed into somewhere the answer's coming.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I suppose in terms of flagging it as a risk, I think it's number 1 or 2 on the corporate risk register. So we do that, but we do, I suppose on a practical level, we do a lot of work with our care providers in the borough to try and ease those pressures. We also have our own care company in Octalis. We've recently purchased a care home where that company had gone into administration. So I'm not going to say swimming against the tide, but you know, there is that kind of in that national context, which I can't change overnight. We have got some quite practical things to support the sustainability of the market in Wokingham as best we can in those conditions, I suppose.
Something about the children's side, because children's social care, a lot of the residential homes are run by hedge funds and similar, which is awful. So they're making vast sums of money. So 5 years ago, there were only 120 children in placements that cost more than £10,000 a week. And now 91% of councils have a child that costs £10,000 a week. And the highest is £63,000 a week. That was about 2 weeks ago. It's eye-watering. So what local authorities are trying to do, including us, is open our own children's homes, because that will take the control away from the profit makers. So we've bought 3 homes ourselves, and we are planning to open them. We're going to register them under one care manager, which is a fairly new thing that CQC have allowed you to do. So we're in the process of sorting that out, and we hope to have them open in about end of March, is it? Something like that. So that we will be able to put children in those homes ourselves, and not have them in really expensive provision. That again, it's like with the SEND schools, there will always be some children who need really specialist care. But at the moment, we are one of a large number of authorities who have found ourselves with children who there's no place for them anywhere in the country. And we've recently had to manage a child in accommodation by themselves. I think it was £14,000 a week, and getting them into a home has reduced that a bit. But there was nowhere, literally no. And of course, it's awful if you've got a child in that situation. The nearest place might be Scotland or Wales, or just horrendous. So we are doing what we can to counter that, and so are a lot of local authorities. So it's one of those things where the fashions change, and people thought it was cheaper to outsource, and then they've put all the power in the hands of the independent companies. So now we need to bring it back. So that's quite a national trend at the moment, and I think we're getting ourselves into a decent position with it, and that we will be able to fill those homes ourselves with our own children. If we can't, then we'll be able to take children from elsewhere to fill them. The business case is very strong for it.
Thank you, Prue. Yeah, eye-watering. Laura, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 3 questions on children's services. So the first one on page 19, on the second row, the short breaks and longer-term care for children with disabilities. In year 3, it's down to 0, which is quite a start for the first 2 years. I wondered why that was.
So savings and road remodeling, how we do. That makes sense.
So we'll still be putting money into this area.
Yes, just not extra. The extra money is going in to do the remodeling. Yes.
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 The
Microphone.
Sorry, I felt like I was loud enough then. There are 3 bids that are to do with that overall business case: a capital bid, a revenue investment, and then a saving against not having lots of family breakdowns and having to place people away. So the 3 bids need to be read together. But it's an upfront investment to remodel, to provide support for families for short breaks in the bath.
Thank you. It might, going forward, be a good idea just to make that clearer, because you know it all through, but I don't. So to me, looking at it, it's very confusing.
I agree, but it's sort of how we do all the bids corporately, which is growth, savings, capital, but quite often in children and adults, you have a bid in each area that's all part of one business case.
It's just clarity in the wording, that's all, just in future, but I'll leave you to take that away. And then second of all, on page 21, the last row, children care website upgrade is £21,000, which is quite a lot for a website upgrade. I know in the grand scheme of things it's peanuts, but I just wondered if we really think we're getting best value for money for whatever the upgrade may be.
21,000 is relatively cheap. We don't really have a proper offer for them at the moment, so we do need to do something more or less from scratch. So and it's only 1 year, so we will hopefully have a better offer for them then. There's quite a lot we need to do with technology, and there's quite a lot of exciting work that's gone on in different parts of the country, which we're nicking to help inform us what we're going to do. Lots of good practice, and so we will get the information much better for them, and then it will hopefully relieve some of the questions that they need to ask sometimes. We don't want to break the human contact, but there's a lot of stuff that we could deliver better, and we just don't get it to them. They don't know where to go to get the information.
So they're not a website at the moment? When I was on Children's Services there in Leicester, which is a number of years ago, I seem to remember the website was quite good.
No, a lot of time has gone, and a lot of people have done a lot better than what we have traditionally offered, and ours has got more obsolete and uses as time has gone on. So yes.
Okay. On page 36, it's CSR4, so the local care leave accommodation, which sounds really interesting, and hopefully we'll hear more about it in January, because we've got the local housing companies item coming. And I just wanted to check that care leavers will be consulted on the places and the designs and everything, because we want to make sure that's where they want to live, it works for their lives, they'll thrive there, because otherwise there's no point. The council spending all that money for places they don't want to stay, and they're not going to stay.
Absolutely correct. So yes, there's a lot of work going on. That there's also a young person's housing strategy being developed at the moment, which that all feeds into, and that will be emerging. I think it's going to Children's Services fairly sometime in the new year. Yes. So Children's Services Overview Scrutiny. So there's a lot of work going on there. What we know from the care leavers we've got now is that they quite like being together in shared housing. Not all of them live in the borough. Some of them have extended families somewhere else, so they might be around the country, and some of them we don't have anything local for. So it's about bringing them back to where, kind of give them a feeling of belonging to us. There's quite a lot of work to do, and of course there's an enormous expansion coming in care leavers. I think because the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children age out and then become care leavers, and we have a national transfer scheme that means that most of the time we have 41 or thereabouts unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in our care. And when they hit 18, they become care leavers. That our number of care leavers is going to increase exponentially, basically over the next few years, and that's something that I know Andrew's committee looks at on a regular basis. Our number of care leavers will go up to about, I think it's predicted to be about between 250 and 300 or something like that in the next 2 or 3 years, because of not the next 5 years, I think it is, but it's going up and up, and so we do need the accommodation, but they do like the shared accommodation, and where they feel that they've got other people around them with similar experiences, similar age. And I suppose it's a bit like my own children. They quite like a flat share to start off with as their first step, and if we can provide it in a place where we've got some support for them, not necessarily residential, but quite a lot of good support, which we have in accommodation we're developing for young people. It works quite well, and we need to keep them with that support to start off with, because young people go out into the world just like our own children would, and they actually need some idea about how to pay your rent and how to manage your money, and how to cook and what an electricity bill is and all those other things that young people need. So I'm quite excited about this, because I think it can be transformative for a lot of young people's lives, and I'm hopeful that we're really going to make a difference. And of course, we've got Wellington Road coming with the first 5 units. That's already been approved, I think, hasn't it? I think so. That will be starting, I don't know when, but quite soon.
Said, sorry you've waited so long with your hand up, but it's your turn now, if you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you, and hopefully you can see me as well. Yes, it is another high-level question, if I may ask, and it is to do with the care workers. Matt highlighted earlier on the issues we already have: low pay, high turnover, and obviously the demand is complex, but the availability is less. I was just wondering, Matt and David, perhaps I just wanted to hear your view with respect to this recently announced statement to do with care workers a couple of weeks ago by the Secretary of State, that they will not be able to bring their spouses, and potentially they're becoming under the skilled worker scheme, which means their salaries will be higher. So in respect of that, what do you think the likely implication is going to be? One, on the availability of care workers, and secondly, the financial pressures it will put as a result of that.
I mean, certainly with care workers, Orbitalis has increased the pay so that they've been paid not much more, but a little bit more, for instance, than the checkout people at Tesco's and people like that. to try and encourage them and try to keep them. But it is an ongoing problem. And as I said at the beginning, the increase in the basic pay is great for people like that, but we've got to pay it. Now, yes, a lot have come from overseas, but we're never going to the amount that you now have to earn if you come from overseas. That's never going to be paid to care workers in a million years. I'm sorry, but that's the fundamental basic. You know, you just know that we're finding it hard enough to keep up with their low pay because of the cost pressures of social care and so on. And therefore, you know, I think that means that probably the workforce coming from overseas will diminish. And many British people feel that they don't get paid enough to make it worthwhile for them to be care workers, and that's the fundamental of it. There's a big percentage of care workers who are within 10 years of retirement and things like that. Within 10 years, this is a crisis, and you know, we've said social care is in crisis, care work's in crisis. The crisis is there. The government has got to step in. But keeps on saying, well, perhaps we will, and then deciding that it's too difficult. And that's the fundamental problem. And I think someone has got to take the bull by the horns and say, you know, one, yes, I believe care workers must be paid decently so that they stay in the job, so that they can see progression through the job, and so that they value and are valued in the job. And that's the first thing. But then we've got to look at the whole system and say, how can we fund this? And funding it is not easy. And certainly in Woking, yes, we're in some ways quite lucky in that a lot of people are self-funders, but that runs out sometimes, well, quite often. And when they run out and they're at a high cost home, we have to say, well, can we afford that, or have we got to move them, and things like that. So that's difficult as well. So there's lots of problems. And I'm not sure that there's many answers at the moment.
Yeah, well, just I suppose to go back to what I said before. So social care needs a national workforce strategy, similar to the NHS. In fact, it should be one joined up strategy. That just needs sorting out and funding, I suppose, and we need to change that dynamic in terms of thinking about social care as a key bit of society's infrastructure. It's something that you need, in the same way that you might need roads. You need social care infrastructure to support a functioning and productive society, and I'm quite passionate about that. Certainly, social care ought to be able to pay on parity with the NHS, and that should be part of that strategy. And I suppose just to give a bit of a sense of the numbers here and why it's so difficult financially for us as a council to buck that trend. In the autumn statement, the national minimum wage went up 9.7%. Most of the care workers get around about minimum wage. 70 or 80% of social care costs are workforce. You know, it's a caring industry. It's about people that support and care for people. So that is a sort of 8% increase just to continue, and every 2% increase in costs in adult social care is a 1% increase alone on council tax. So you can kind of see how this is quite a fundamental thing that needs to be sorted. We are in quite a difficult position in terms of workforce and adult social care.
Thank you, Matt. Catherine.
Page 21 seems to be getting a lot of hits. And I was going to ask about the Spencer's Wood Primary School, or whether the figure was just parked there, or whether it's really actually going to get built in 2024, 25.
That's a carry forward, and I don't. I would think it's going to sit there until we can get a determination on all the issues that are around whether we can build on that site. Yes. Yeah, it's not a new thing. It's just sitting there. We do need to resolve it, but we obviously have specific issues in Shinfield and Spencer's Wood to do with sufficiency of school places locally. So we are looking at that quite hard, but it's a slightly difficult situation, as you'll be aware, because of where the school is.
Well, I'd also observe that it's probably not enough to build a school anymore.
No, that's a very small figure. That wouldn't even build you a classroom. You need a couple of £1 million for a school. Yep.
I'm not sure who was first, Alice. Do you want to, Norman?
Okay, thank you. Again, it kind of follows on to the social worker question earlier, but on CSR 6, page 38. Just wondering the number of newly qualified social workers that are coming through being relatively small. Is that because we're nationally not training enough, or are we just not linked in well enough to where they're coming from? I mean, we talked about this a few years ago, sort of forming relationships with colleges and that type of thing. I just wondered what the story is behind this reduction in numbers.
So traditionally we've done quite well at recruiting social workers, and they finish they qualify as part of and then they stay with us quite. But last year we had a dip. We're not quite sure why we had a dip, but we think it's probably that we're not paying the same as other Berkshire authorities. I think that's probably it. So we've got this thing on page 38, which has got savings and growth. So the growth is on page 44. Of looking again at that. So there'll be a market supplement. I think that's already been agreed for social workers. We've got a big plan for recruiting social workers at the beginning of their careers and getting them to stay with us. And apprenticeships, which I know was brought to Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny by the social workers themselves. We had a presentation at that committee, and that was one of the things they wanted, and that's one of the things we were able to do. And we've got a grant from the government to assist us with the cost of that. So there's a lot of work going on trying to counter the difficulties. It is a difficult market. Social worker, permanent social workers is probably the biggest issue in Children's Services. Obviously the cost of placements and other things at home school transport, but social workers is a really big issue. Everybody's struggling and agencies are quite powerful, and we're trying to fight them off at the moment. I don't know whether Matt wants to add to that.
Well, only to say this bid is us sharpening our elbows in the market as best we can. I mean, I think that we're confident that will pay off. But I suppose to answer your first question, Norman, we need to train more nationally. And then the other bit that we've been calling for is we need some kind of national regulation of the agency market and what they will pay as well. Those sort of three things together would help enormously.
How do you mean regulation of the agency market? How would that help?
Well, go on. Do you want to
so the Association of Directors of Children's Services are asking for a cap on the amount of fees that can go to agencies and what they can charge councils, because the market is quite distorted by agencies, and one of the things they've started doing is, for example, offering you a team of social workers and saying you need to take this team of social workers rather than take individual people on an agency basis. It costs a lot of money for agency workers, as you'll be aware. Some councils have had some success in converting their agency workers to permanent staff. It's quite hard, but some are making some progress. But unless we can get that cap on what agencies can charge, there's no incentive to, the workers will keep going to the agencies and getting paid more money, and they're making quite a profit out of it as well. So it's not helping anything there, because there's just not enough money in the system to pay. So this is one of the things that's been asked for. And I don't know how it's going to land with the government, but it was made to ministers in at the recent national conference that they referred to it, and we're hoping that they are going to listen, because they have announced some changes. I don't remember whether that was one of them, but there are some changes to how agencies are regulated coming.
So these newly qualified people, how many could we cope with in a year? What would be our ideal sort of number?
I think we're going for about as many as we can manage to get, but you can't destabilise your team, because you have to be very careful when you've got a newly qualified social worker. They can't take the caseloads or the complexity of cases that experienced members group. So you've got to balance your teams. So we can take 1 or 2 in each team, but you couldn't have a team made of newly qualified social workers, because you just wouldn't be able to deal with the cases that you need to deal with, and you put them off immediately as well. So they'd crumble under the pressure, as well as not know what to do. So it's a careful balancing act. So we will take as many as we can reasonably manage. I think that's probably as many as we can get. I think probably we could take more than we will be able to get, but not many more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you need to mentor them. It takes quite a lot of effort to bring new people in, management time and everything. I just wondered then, is it of the order of 20, or would that be a reasonable number? I'm just trying to get a feel for the feel.
It's 8 to 10, but you've got to have the people who are qualified,
yes,
working with them.
Yeah, I mean,
assessing their work and so on, and making sure they have reasonable cases.
That number's in about the right area. There is a detailed business case behind this with those target numbers all in it, which we can share, but it's about that number. If we're successful, we'll go bigger,
Okay, great, thank you.
If I could just add to that, what sort of percentage is that of the workforce? The required workforce?
So quite difficult to answer, because it's only particular teams and particular roles that are in scope, but maybe 10% or so as a kind of guide figure.
Yeah, on the same sort of subject, just wondering, do social workers trained locally at local institutions, or do we sponsor any sort of training at colleges? And given that we're like small unitaries, should we form a cartel of some sort?
You can't form a cartel. It's not allowed. No, we have to be really, really careful not to be seen to be colluding with other local authorities to fix the costs, because the agencies will take us to court if we look like we're trying to fix the market. That's a particular problem in the southeast, where we have to be careful also not to compete against each other. So it's a fine balancing act, where some local authorities break ranks and then pay more, and then the other ones are all moaning and whinging. But yeah, there are local institutions. I think Reading University trains them, doesn't it? I think so.
Yeah,
Yes.
University does.
We have a good relationship with them.
Certainly, Woking College used to. Should they still do CSS? So yeah.
Yeah, and Bucks College as well,
Yeah.
and we have links for those, and we also use our apprenticeship levy to support
And the Open University does
apprenticeship
support it
training.
as well.
Because it just seems to me that authorities that have got larger geographic areas like Hampshire or somewhere, it's more difficult to travel to a neighbouring authority. So, because getting out of Hampshire is a lot further, whereas we've got lots of small ones doing the same thing. We're at a massive disadvantage.
What they tell us when they is things like it's the caseload that they'll be given and the types of cases that they'll be expected to deal with, and the accommodation costs, and the training and support that they get, and the mentoring. They want somewhere where they know they'll be secure and not dumped in it. But they also, one of the things that we struggle with is the cost of accommodation locally. So we're looking at key worker housing and that kind of thing, because that's what's tending to put them off at the moment. They quite like, we have our caseloads adjusted suitably, and they quite, once they're here, they like it. But it's getting them in, because until recently our salaries have also been down. So by increasing those, we expect to get more interest. But we need to do something about the accommodation if we can as well, because that seems to be the determinant. They don't mind travelling to a different place to start their careers at all.
Yeah, that's right. And it's although it's a different market, it's a similar model to one we've tried in adults. And we were at Health Overview and Scrutiny looking at that workforce strategy a while ago. And I mean, the headline figure is we're getting twice as many applications as this year that we were 12 months ago, having gone through that process.
Peter.
Going on to back to CSR4, I think Laura touched on this part of it. One direct question there, is that going to include Seaford Court?
Seaford Court has got a particular legal covenant thing on it, which we have to get over, to do with what it can be used for. Legal think that we've found the way round it. So yes, we are planning to bring that into use. You probably know more about it than me. No.
Well, I suppose the key answer to that is Seaford Court is part of this business case and is under consideration. But at this point in time, we're exploring those possibilities and making sure that the right accommodations and that works out for the people that need them. So we're still building that detailed business case by property. So Seaford Court is in that consideration. There's a lot of work going on corporately, looking at working that through, visiting specifications, thinking about what needs doing to the building, all those considerations. But we're just not quite there to say it's definitely this property, and that property at the moment publicly.
Okay, the only reason I noticed that on the report is actually you've got a savings thing, but you've got a capital of 2 million there. So I was just wondering what's going on. It seems be in my bonnet with that property is that it's sitting there doing nothing.
It's a travesty to leave a building like that. It has got these legal constraints on it, but they're trying to find a way around it to bring it back into use. But it's part of a wider consideration, exactly as Matt described. So that recently there was an away afternoon where, with property and children's services, they went through everything that we've got that might be usable for something as part of the overall plan for the council's assets, which I think will be coming to overview and scrutiny at some point in 2024 to go through all the portfolio and how we can make the best use of all the buildings. So you may know that we've recently brought the old Farley Hill School back into use as an outreach unit for early years SEND from Addington. So everything is being looked at, and how we can bring it into the best kind of use to make the best use of everything that we've got, because we've been driven in that direction anyway. But we've got to utilise all our assets as best we can in order to try and save money elsewhere. And we have got something, there's a lot of juggling going on, but it will come out. It's not all nailed down yet, but there's some good things I think likely to happen.
Really.
Yep.
Okay, I've got some more questions, but let the floor to everybody else.
You've got the floor.
Okay. CSR 14, the IT system. I always have a bit of a bugbear with this one every year. I find it astonishing that we've got £7 million, or is it 9 million? Sorry, for license fees. It seems. I didn't note the page numbers down. My apologies.
This is the special item for the education management system. This is £9 million isn't just for this. No. No. This is we have systems which we haven't fully utilised all the components of. So the extra 195k, and this is to help us fully use the systems that we've got and all the components and bits of it. Obviously it's a one-off spend but we haven't had in children's services very good management information, and some of the time we haven't even had very good data. So we are trying to fix an awful lot of that, and one of the other things that you'll see in here is the transformation. So there's a lot of work on the savings side going into how we get better management information to make better decisions. And some of that is already bearing fruit because things have become obvious which we didn't know about before. And it's also part of the reasons why we're now able to have more confidence that although the figures for the increase, the growth in children's services are quite eye-watering, really, we actually have information that we base those on now instead of not being able to forecast, not having the right tools. So we are moving in that direction. But then the 9 million covers quite a lot of different systems. It's not just for this. It's all the support and stuff in that area.
Okay, fair enough. It's just I know with a favourite company I know they sell you everything, hoping you might use it, but you don't use it. Okay. Anybody else? I notice on CSC2 again, I didn't know the page number. There's a lot of TBCs as opposed to numbers. Yeah, just page 51, my apologies. TBC about cost and income line. Some properties will set up provide support.
So is that bow hunt? No, sorry, I'm looking in the right place. Where am I looking? 51.
It's accommodations again. It's the accommodations for children again.
All right. Yes. It's because everything's still in the mix. So we that figure is kind of like how much we think we can manage to make available to spend rather than, and we will do it for what we can for the money. That's
pretty much it. I mean, yes, I mean, so, some of the business cases are more fully funded than others, I suppose, because projects deliver at different times, and tonight is tonight, I suppose. So that's the answer to that. No, I can't find the number.
It will be fully formed by the time we come to the actual budget meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it just reflects a little concern I had if we're doing some scrutiny of a budget, but there's a TBC there that means we can't actually look at it.
Yeah, it's just simply a timing issue, and because otherwise we would not put anything in, and then people wouldn't get the site. So.
I'm still giving everybody else a chance. Okay, moving on to the next one, which is the following page, is laptops for children. I think that's an excellent thing. I'm really pleased to see that there. What I'm wondering is how many laptops, what's the cost per laptop, and what's the supplier, and what's the guarantees around those?
I can't answer that in detail, but I do know that there are increasing numbers of children, and that's why we've had to put more money. It's something that's been happening for a long time. So they get laptops. So every child that's of school age, if they're in care, they have a virtual school over the top of their normal school. So the virtual school looks after children in care, makes sure that their physical schools are dealing with them properly, and acts like the sort of corporate parenting bit of the education system. So as you would give your own child a laptop, we give them a laptop, but they're not terribly high spec. And I don't think it's probably like a Chromebook or something like that. I think it's not anything startling, and they don't get them refreshed every year or anything like that. We expect them to have them for 3 or 4 years. So we can find out exactly what the spec is if you like.
Yeah, the point of the question is just whether you work with refurbishment firms who actually refurbish laptops, or do you go out and buy a new Chromebook? It's basically are you getting a good bang for your buck there, and like you're not spending 20k on.
They do try, but we can find out exactly for you.
URL on that one doesn't work, by the way. On that bid page, the URL doesn't work. It's just a point of fun. Got down ACS R6. Very so I was just wondering what the impact of this is on our residents in terms of the changing of the retirement age and how that currently works. I've never heard of this before, so I just wondered, is there going to be a pushback from residents who are receiving it or who think their spouses might be receiving it next year, whatever?
Basically, it's putting it in line with all our fellow local authorities. So it's and it's about 180 people. So it's not that many people. And
so just to explain, because I heard you say that. What is it? So it's adult social care is charged for. A means tested charge for adult social care. Whether that's right or wrong is a separate, I suppose, issue. This is part of that charging regime where you have a minimum income guarantee at a particular age for retirement. Many other, all other local authorities have that at the kind of normal retirement age, 67 pension age. We've had that at 60. So the proposal here is to align that with others. To do that, though, we'd have to go through a full consultation process and look at the impacts of that. But it would bring in income that we're not bringing in currently that most other local authorities are. That's why it's in the savings side of things. But it is something that require a full consultation and impact assessment, which is why you'll see there's a special item that correlates to that, which is about plugging that saving, I suppose, for a time while that can happen.
I just wanted some detail in that. My major concern really is if someone is in receipt of, say, the money, then their partner who's coming up to that age is thinking, I'm going to get that money, and then suddenly because of this process, they're not. Then that's going to be seen as a negative and whatever.
Yes, which is why we need to do a consultation. But what you described there is pretty much what happens to everyone who gets charged for adult social care.
Cool. Sorry, next one, ACSC2. Yes. Next page. That's on page 71. It's more about, there's a lot of interesting items there, and I know people locally have been complaining about healthcare, etc. I'm just wondering how this money is to be spent to improve that situation, bearing in mind staffing, etc.
So yes, again, that one relates to a revenue efficiency line as well, a savings line too. So I suppose the detail of exactly what that's to be spent on needs to be worked through and agreed with our local integration partnership with our health partner. So we haven't got the detail of exactly it's going to be spent on that at the moment, but essentially it's using that capital money to fund services to create revenue efficiency through that programme.
Okay, I think I just wanted to make sure we're getting the bang for the buck. Really, there. That's
I mean
the question.
Yeah, me too. Given the overall position of the budget, which is why we brought that section 106 money into play.
Which then makes it. Is this something that can be done with section 106? I just thought 106 was for actual physical buildings type of thing.
It's for medical needs, and the NHS can't spend it or won't spend it. So we've said, well, we can spend it on medical things.
My next one is CSC3, purchasing 4 one-bedroom flats. Are they a realistic cost?
Sorry, page number.
I'm sorry, I didn't note down any page number.
So this is one of the previous bids, isn't it, from last time? It's not, yes. So some of this will be kind of overtaken by events with the other accommodation that we're looking at in the bigger picture things. So the answer to that is it's a previous bid. It's not a new bid, and it's there for your information. I think that's the right thing, and not as part of this budget. I think that's what this one is.
Yeah, it's got a slight increase from 940 to 1.2.
Yeah.
So we're talking about another 200k.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I can't one.
Yeah, it's
my page.
Yes, sorry. Let me find it in here. It's more accommodation for care leavers, isn't it? Yes. So there's a bigger picture. Yes.
Oh, yes. So I think because it was a previous bid, it's in the budget, and then the new bids in the same area will be added together.
Yes. So it's part of.
It looks like it's not enough money.
Yes.
It may be part of one business case.
Yeah.
Thank you. And oops. Anybody else want to ask questions?
I'd like to catch Syed because he's had his hand up for a long time. Is that okay? Syed, if you online?
Yes, I am. I am online.
You had your hand up, or was that a legacy hand?
Actually, I had my hand up. It was to do with the comment which was made earlier on regarding laptop given to sort of after children. Just a suggestion was that, you know, laptops are important, but what really were found and useful is to skill them for the jobs which are available in the marketplace, because we do want them to stand on their own feet, and that will really enable them to do that. There are literally, as we know, lots of jobs available in the marketplace, but not skilled people are available. But I think in the long term, if we really want to help them in the long term so they can stand on their own feet, I'm just going to suggest that perhaps it is worth looking for us to something, perhaps upskill them in the jobs which are available so they can stand on their own feet. Laptop is good, but if this can upskilling, then can be even better. Thank you.
So I think perhaps you've misunderstood what this is about. This is about enabling them to do their schoolwork like anybody else. And they do get, through the virtual school, they get proper careers advice. They get a lot of support. There's an enormous amount of stuff that goes on. The virtual school is really powering away. We've got the new governing body set up. We've I think, in fact, some of Andrew's, the Children's Services Committee went to one of the governing body meetings. There's an awful lot going on to achieve exactly that, to give our children in care and care leavers the best possible start in life, and to enable them to be skilled. But this is purely about making sure that they are as equipped as all the other children to do their homework and their schoolwork. And not anything more than that. The rest of it, well, I could go on for hours about what happens in the virtual school. I'd be very happy to talk to you about that. But it's a whole network of stuff, and I can share some information with you if you're interested in that.
Alistair, quick, before he gets his man up.
Yeah, just to say, in the capital bids, there's a couple that got a RAG status of red. These ones we should worry about. CSC1, page 74, and CSC4 on page 80. Matter, they got RAG status of red.
CSC1, was that one of them? Yes, right. That's the secondary school's basic need. That's because it's pretty critical that we get this sorted out, and it's we're making progress, and we think we will be there. I'm not sure why it's still red, but we have got a plan for providing enough secondary school places in September, and it's within the budget, so the budget's allocated out in the 4.5 million, but we've got enough offers, but it is kind of like mission critical, so I'm not sure why it's red, to be honest. I think it's probably an amber thing now, because although we do have to build them, so there is a you know, the work needs to take place, which is not entirely under our control.
Yes, essentially, I think focus here was bringing in the new bid templates, which we've done. These are simply old templates that were put through before some time ago. So I think they've just not been reviewed, or the RAG status has not been updated. I think that's what's happened.
I think that's
because they're for information and weren't supposed to be new templates to be considered. So I think that needs looking at.
But no, we are on course to have enough places.
Peter.
ACSC 3 talks about a grant of 500k. is that going to be a guaranteed grant, or if not, does that lead us to trouble? ASC C3. Sorry about page numbers. 92. In the project description, it talks about the mosaic system, and then it goes on to say the capital requirement has been increased by 500k, expected to be fully funded from grant. So
Information.
We'll get you a follow-up answer, but I'm almost 100% sure that means that we've got grant funding coming from the government, which will be used to fund that. So it's fairly secure.
As Alistair's kindly pointed out to me, I'm looking at bits which are there for information only. So I'll save my last question. Yeah, I'll be glad to hear I'm done.
Anybody else from the floor have any questions? Okay, so I had two items. One's already been answered thoroughly. I want to go back to page 39 and our red item for the National Health funds that are desperately required. And it's just a quantifying question. Do we have any ideas as a general, and it's a rule of thumb, it's not a specific figure I'm looking for here, as to the lead time from the costs being incurred to the funds being made available? Is there anything in that?
So this is more complicated than that. So this is kind of, Matt referred to this a bit earlier on about when you have an education, health and care plan, there's a word health in there. And therefore health should be funding the medical part of the plan. We have not been extracting that money from the NHS over a long period of time. And we are considerably worse off in getting the NHS to fund those elements of the plans than almost anywhere else in the country. So this is a savings target based on somebody who's already in place doing the work, looking at where we've got the plans which are most likely to generate the most income and have the best case, and it's being put to the NHS that they should now start funding the things that they haven't funded. It's an estimate based on, there's a lot of these, so it's a conservative estimate based on how much we think we can get in the year from attacking this group of plans with the NHS. And so it's, at the moment we're paying it and we think they should be paying it, and it's part of that negotiation. We recognise the NHS is also strapped for cash and their difficulties, but they are showing some signs of wanting to come to the table and talk to us about children's services in more detail. So we are hopeful that we will make progress in this area. But there's a lot of these plans, and that's a tiny corner of what we could get if we were lucky. So it's a small amount put in there as a not exactly a target, but an estimate of what is realistic to achieve.
Thanks, Bruce. So if we get a Mike Tyson in the corner who's very confrontational with the NHS and they back down, you could do well, but it is all down to personalities and responses.
Yes, it's down to relationship building and persistence and willingness to engage. And there are signs that things are shifting, but it's early days. Yep.
Thank you. Anybody else on the floor? Peter.
Just one more. Sorry, this is a tangential question, really. With regards to the laptops you're giving to the children, have you got some indemnity type of stuff? It just occurred to me. I know with my work, if they give us a laptop, we have to return it because of the batteries and so forth. So they're not liable for the impact of the battery on the environment. So do we have something like that in place to make sure we're covered?
I don't have. I don't know about the specifics, but I know that there's a whole wraparound service to that. So we've got a follow-up question, so it can give you a bit more of a detailed briefing about that scheme, which will address some of those things, I think.
Thank you. I think unless there's anybody who've got any more questions, I think that's got us to that point. So if I just take us back then to, I didn't want to say what the recommendation was up front, because I didn't want to preempt the questions and sort of say it's just a handshaking exercise to say yes, thank you very much, and away you go. So the recommendation was to note the unprecedented financial challenges faced nationally by local government and the subsequent impact on Wokingham Borough Council, together with the particular challenges for Wokingham, to recognise the imperative for responsible financial management, and to consider the report, challenge proposals, and identify further ideas to address the financial shortfall. One thing I would say here is, I think you have looked at every possible idea to address the shortfall. I think it's going to be extremely difficult for anybody to come up with a new idea that's going to be a eureka moment. And I am very grateful for that you put the effort in to put this report forward, and we are. My personal view is I've got my fingers crossed for the year. If anybody else has got any comments they'd like to make, other than that, can I take a proposer to propose that we accept or take a note of this as is? Thank you, Peter. Seconder. Thank you, Charles. Those in favour? Thank you all. And on behalf of the committee, David, thank you very much for sitting there, not standing there, but taking the assault from Peter and everybody else that came on. Thank you all for your questions. It's been very enlightening. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the litter bins task and finish group. And this is to confirm the terms of reference of the litter bins task and finish group, which is on page 13. As it was considered in this committee meeting, I don't know, do you want me to go through the background, or are we happy with the background? Thank you. Are there any comments about the terms of references? Please, John.
Thank you. When I was reading through it, I found it quite jarring because there's quite a lot of focus on littering and stopping littering, which seems to be very different to bins, because there seems to be an assumption that the bins will go, and therefore we need to be thinking about how can we reduce littering. And that isn't really made as clear with the purpose of the report and the recommendations. It's almost as if it's very subtly implying that bins will have to go, when obviously we can't predetermine what this task and finish group is going to come up with at all. So although it has to be rounded, I would recommend just toning down the points on littering, because otherwise it does imply that lots of bins will be got rid of, and actually we need to try to reduce littering because the bins aren't there anymore.
I do accept that comment. I didn't quite read that was how we were going to postulate this in that it was about when bins are full, that is concerned, people are putting stuff on by the side of the bins, that's considered littering. Fly tipping, that is actually legally, that's classed as fly tipping, and that's where that element came into it. But there is definitely no predetermination on this that we are going to get rid of all the bins. The main purpose of the task and finish group was to look at the opportunities to rationalise some bin positions. This is why I asked for volunteers for the group across the different areas of the borough. So we've got a different perspective, towns and countryside, etc. And to look at engaging businesses and parish councils to see what their activities are. I mean, a lot of parish councils got quite extensive litter bin positioning and activities, and to see. To look at that, and the other one was there is a community assumption that the council is responsible for every litter bin that should be put in place, but we have a lot of estates developments that aren't adopted, where those estates residents are paying for a local management company to deliver the goods, and we don't seem to have any input into what they do. So this is another thing for the task committee to have a look at that in the planning aspect of things. Is there something that can be enforced or put into the planning application side that a developer is responsible for positioning bins? Whether they become adopted or not is besides the question, besides the point. It's the fact that the estate is properly served. There's dog waste collection, etc., put in place. If it does become a case that the estate is paying for that, the residents are paying for that, but at least there is a service there that's standard, that is acceptable for everybody. And it's about the education side of things and everything else. I hope that came across with the terms and references. But is there specific points in there that you think actually you'd like to see maybe modified?
I agree that the focus should be on efficiencies, learning from partnerships, getting better partnerships, learning from other councils, best practice. And I think, I mean, the background said it all. Of the issue is really about the concerns about perhaps bins going rather than bins overflowing. That wasn't the issue so much, and we just need to make sure that isn't the case going forward, and that actually they are being emptied regularly enough. I think there's the nudge point about people littering. I don't think, I mean, none of us in this room, if there wasn't a bin there, would litter. So it's kind of the implication that, oh, we're just going to have lots of littering if we don't have bins. But as you said, there isn't a presumption that there's not going to be bins. So it's just being really balanced on that.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, we can't make a recommendation. I don't think the task group could be able to come forward, or this committee make a recommendation to the council. Let's double up on the bins, because that's an expense that we're not aiming for. At the end of the day, we are all, I think, aware that there is a financial situation that's got to be managed. If there are savings to be made, this is one of the targets. And in the savings don't necessarily mean remove bins, but maybe it's about encouraging businesses to develop and produce more facilities. It's about, can we get facilities to be improved or increased without there being a cost to the council? And in some instances, if we get to that point in the towns, for argument's sake, where the businesses come on board, then that would reduce the number of council responsible bins, for argument's sake. So this is knock-on effect, and this is the area that I hope that the task and finish group can go into. But yes, I still did take your point on the fact that we may have, the wording may infer that we don't think people are tidy. And I think the problem there is that what we've had is we've had some quite heavy social media campaigns been developed and put forward, and there's been lots of photographs showing that overflowing bins and all sorts of things. And unfortunately, some of those actually indicate that it is a case of misuse, public misuse, when we see a blue bag that's normally put out for rubbish being stuffed into a bin. Somebody's missed the collection, stuck it in a bin to be collected. Now nobody can use that rubbish bin for their local pocket rubbish. So there are elements of that, and that is about educating, I think. So unless there's anything major in there, that if there's any wording in there that you think might need to be modified, if you can identify it. And then
I suppose number 4, specialist groups such as Keep Britain Tidy. I mean, they're a littering group rather than a proper bin usage group, or I just wondered why they had been singled out. So that's a
would-
question mark on that one.
Yeah, I think there is the wording might come, specialist groups such as Keep Britain Tidy. There's no limitation. They're the only people. It will be down to Task and Finish Group to do the research and get the officers to help with that research, because they'll have contact hopefully with the various different groups, and to expand upon that list. This isn't a definitive list by any means. This is definitely a case of
so we may not even have Keep Britain Tidy.
may not even be in there. It depends what we find or what the group finds.
So that's just something to raise. I mean, number 5, to consider opportunities to improve partnership working in town and parish councils. I would just worry that they might feel, oh no, the borough council is going to double all the responsibility on us. So I think that just needs to make clear that no, the council isn't going to shirk its responsibilities. And then it's the number 6 one of behavioural insights to reduce littering. And that's not about improper use of the bins. It is actually littering. And I'm not quite sure what that's got to do with the bins in general.
Well, for item 6, if there's littering in a particular area, the inference is someone wants to put a bin there to stop it happening. So why is the littering occur in the first place? So this is about educating people in certain areas to say, well, why are you doing this? And I'll use an example, and I'm by any means pointing fingers. But if we take an event like a Reading Football Club match, with the people that don't want to pay the high car parking fees, putting their cars out in the streets, etc., the various routes back to their cars, they're carrying their cans, etc., or whatever it might be. And it is quite evident when you go and walk down on a Saturday after a home match where the litter streams are. And there are litter streams through footways, over bridges, into residential areas. And it is purely from that environment. So it's about how do we stop that happening. Now, we could turn around and say, well, we know it's going to happen, let's go and put bins there. But whose responsibility should that be? Should it be Reading Football Club, or should it be the borough? Because it crosses two council areas, Reading and Wokingham. So for me, that's where that was heading. This wasn't turning around and saying that littering is a national habit, although it's become one, I think, especially when you see things thrown out of cars nowadays. But for locally, it's about what can we do for education, what campaigns can we put together to nudge people in the right direction, and then again look at the businesses that might be involved and see whether they can encourage actions. I did pull something out earlier at another social media page, was that there's quite a few schemes where you can have recycling machines put in place where you put your can in, you get a token, you get a response. So it's actually the old thing of you deposit. So effectively, if they put the price is up slightly for buying the goods that have got recyclable containers, if you go and recycle them, you get your deposit back effectively. So this is a way to encourage. So it's things like that we might be looking for. And I did notice that quite a lot of councils have actually signed up to those sort of schemes, and they're doing quite well. It might only be the cans and the bottles, but the cans and the bottles that get dumped on the streets as they walk past the football clubs, etc., and out the pubs and the clubs and I will say it, the kebab van. But again, it's for the group to explore, and hopefully, I mean, it's going to be a long slog. It's not going to be a quick fix. We're not going to find answers in a few weeks or months before we go for election progress. So it's definitely going to go well into next year. So I'll take note on 6.
Because what we don't want to do is we need to save money, and we don't want to divert money to a communications campaign, which may actually be more expensive and less effective than just putting a bin there. So that's why I was getting at it from on that area. So I think it's making sure the scope's not too large, because there's so many things to explore here, because it's relatively straightforward issue to focus on, and not sort of being pulled in different directions of assumptions, which I know we've made clear is not where we want to be.
Yeah, I personally think that a campaign is worth spending, because if we don't spend the money on a campaign, we end up with bin creep. We end up with more bins, basically, because the rubbish still gets dumped. So we end up with a problem we've got to resolve, and the only way that's going to be resolved is with another bin. So I think there should still be a campaign of some description, or we should look at campaigns and see how they can be done. I mean, pardon me, the bins are a perfect advertising space, for argument's sake. We're not putting notices on there saying what can go in this bin. We don't put multi-facet bins like some of the parish councils do, like Shinfield. All their bins now are all recyclables, waste, general, etc. So, does that expense, is that worthwhile? Is it something? Well, it's something the parish thinks is. So they're doing it for their properties that they're responsible for. And when we look at where the parish put things, are we doubling up? Are they ignoring their areas because there happens to be a Wokingham bin just around the corner, so they don't bother to put other things out for their play areas or their green spaces, etc. Because of that, it's all about. There's a lot of things to be looked at, and it is a case of it's going to be a lot of footwork for the group, because it's although we want the officers' input and we want a more detailed view of the reports that were done to find out why they made their decisions or what they based their decisions on, and look at that and see whether that needs modifying as well. The assumptions in there. So there is a lot to do. I think this is a good grounding, and there's nothing that says this is a limitation. If the group finds that there's something in there they wish to add or they want to modify, then that's within their remit and come back and say, you know, what you think.
I suppose we don't have anything in here on campaigns, which I know you were mentioning. Yeah. And number 6 is very different to advertising on the side of the bin, what should go in there or not. I don't think anyone would disagree with that, but number 6 is very focused on littering, and we're not going to put probably anything on a bin about littering because there's a bin there. I mean, it's not a hill I'm going to die on, but
I thought we had it in here.
It's quite broad.
I thought we had it in here because we talked. The campaign side of things was education.
Oh, good.
Yeah, 7. To consider potential campaigns to support behaviour change to yeah. It's the next one down. It's just under your pen. So there are things in there.
Yes, you're right. It's got more things about preventing littering, number 7 as well. Yeah. So yeah, we've got 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all about preventing litter when we're focusing on the bins. But like I said, it's not a hill to die on. But it does seem to be assuming what the outcome is going to be and widening the remit very broadly. But I've made my point.
Thanks. I do take it on board. Sorry.
Just clarify, Chair, there was quite a long conversation at the previous meeting when I think all members contributed, and this is actually a summary of that discussion. So I think that's the background to it. It's not an officer thing. This is what the committee agreed at the last meeting.
So taking those comments on board, etc. So this is a very good starting point. It is up to the group if they feel that there are modifications they want to make on here, if in their investigations, if they suddenly find a eureka moment or a business proposition that makes sense, then yes. So the item then is this is as a starting point, as a base. Are we in agreement that these reflect our views from the various meetings? So I could have a proposal to accept to say that. Thank you, Marie-Louise. Seconder. Alistair, and those in favour of accepting these comments, these stands, thank you. I know it's okay, but if you agree with, yes, that's what I should have done as well, is to introduce you as a replacement for our absent friend, who has now moved on to the executive, so he can't sit on the committee. So no, Catherine is now our new member. So. As a side to this, there was the call for volunteers. Marie-Louise put her hand up, and we have 2 members of the Lib Dem group to come forward, which is Catherine, and Beth Rowland has put her hand forward as well, so she will be sitting on this as well. And so far, I know that Keith Baker will be has been volunteered. Do we know of anybody else, Norman?
We don't as yet, so we need to get back to you on that one. But he did volunteer himself.
Do we have a second person from the group?
We don't have a name yet, so we need to come back to you on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
But it does seem that you've got 2 people from Woodley and you were trying to have a spread of town and country and different areas.
Yes.
But you've got Beth and
yeah.
Pete.
We did put that request in, but I think there were 4 areas that were left sort of vacant-ish. Finchhampstead and Arborfield down the bottom end, up the top end of Twyford and the other and the top end of things. So I think Keith is the best. It is a good person to have on board because of experience over the years. And it would be advantageous if we could get a member from the to a Conservative group who lived or had an influence or a reference in maybe the south or the far north. But we'll see who feels that it's something they want to do. I think that's the biggest problem. We don't want to press gang someone who doesn't want to be there. I'd really prefer to have someone that feels that they can put some work in on the project. So I think that's closed that particular item. Which takes us to the work programme.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry, yes.
Do we have a date of when the task and finish group is to convene for their first meeting?
I think we need the names. I don't want to press before Christmas, but I would turn around and say our next meeting is.
I put early January in the report, so we'll try and get things kicked off at the start of the year.
Yeah, I just don't want it.
We'll definitely be wanting something done
Okay.
on the move by the 22nd, by our next meeting. And if we can get it done earlier, then we will try to do that. And I'll make their first meeting the 1st of January. That suits everybody.
So on the work programme, I've been trying to rationalise it, and I put an extra sheet out at the door. So has everybody got that updated version? If not, would you like to avail yourselves of that piece of paper?
Explain.
Right. So on the first page, for the next meeting on the 22nd of January, we've got the medium-term financial plan, which is the final iteration with Graham, and that will be a fair chunk of the meeting. Because following that process, the committee each year writes a report which gets appended to the budget papers. So at that meeting, the members need to have a conversation about what key points they want to make as part of the process. The second one on the list, local housing companies, we received notification about this just recently. So there's been a review of the council-owned housing companies, and they would like to bring it to scrutiny early in the new year before it goes on to the executive. So that's been put in there for members to decide whether or not they want to take that item. Then we have violence against women and girls, which has been on there. And I spoke to Narinda, and she's happy to bring a report if members are happy with that. So that's 3 items for January. Then turn over the page. So the March meeting has got a flavour around emergency services and council services around risk. And there's one additional thing there, which is the adverse weather plan. So again, I think the existing plan was out of date and has been updated. So we've had a request if we could take that to this committee before it goes to the executive. And again, that will seem to fit with the other items on there. In addition to that, there were 2 other issues which we've been requested to look at. I think Prue mentioned earlier that there's going to be an item going to the executive next year on strategic asset management, which is looking at the council's assets across the borough. And we've had a request to bring that here because it's going to executive in March. But the March executive has been moved forward because of the election purdah. So we've been asked if we would consider having a new meeting at the end of February to consider that item. And there's also another item which Charles will be aware of, which is the various planning issues happening in Arborfield and the surrounding area. And we've been asked if we'd take an item on that just to see if we can coordinate what's happening in terms of those various projects around the new SEND schools, the various roadworks and housing developments, etc., etc. So those two items, the asset management and that item on Arborfield, could actually fit into that additional meeting if members are happy to arrange one.
If I may, Neil, it's Barkham. It's to do a Barkham ride, but
So my first question would be, are we of a mind to have this additional meeting in February towards the end? Yes, everybody's nod for that. Okay. Do you have any, but I don't know about half term, apart from the noise outside the front of the house. Third. And when was the meeting, the executive meeting, March?
On the 14th. I've looked at the diary and there seems to be a vacant evening on the 28th of February.
28th. Sorry, what days are Easter? Thursday or Tuesday? Doesn't matter. Just I'm trying to think how many we've got. I've only got 5 days before the next one. Yeah. Has anybody got any objections to that date? Don't hear any dissenting voices. Nobody's wedding anniversary, anything like that. Okay. So subject to approval from our other halves, 28th of February for the additional meeting to cover those two items. And we have started the ball rolling with this, Charles, to get the officers to go and look at and have the conversations in house so we can get the feedback. So we should have the material we want for the 28th. Sorry, Laura.
Thank you. Just also in the January meeting, great, it's got the full strategy. Can it also have an update on the anti-abuse charter as well? Because that was presented in tandem and it complements it. So it'd be great to have it all together. And I think that was one of the recommendations last time when the VORG strategy comes back, to also get an update on the anti-abuse charter. And also, just to be clear, I know really supportive that local housing companies is on this. I know that originally I had Sarah Morgan, who was going to present the council's building assets across the borough. Is that essentially what we're going to be looking at in February? Or is that something separate?
Yes, the special meeting in February.
Brilliant. That's great. I just want to be clear. We're not missing out on anything. Thank you.
So we're all in agreement in the changes in the additional meeting. Action. Pardon me. Action tracker, item 81 on page 19. So let's see what's completed, what's ongoing. So our ongoing item on page 19 towards the bottom is now in place for February.
Chairman, just on that same page, the combating drugs partnership, there seems to be an outstanding item there.
So at the last meeting, it was suggested that might go to the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So I've asked them and they're happy to take that item. So it comes on our list.
Okay, so we just put transfer to Oscar, whatever on there. I mean, we did have a couple of meetings on the business case template. So we did have that, and we haven't had a meeting recently. So I guess it's almost kind of come to an end. I'm not sure if we're due to have another one or not, but we did have 2 or 3 sessions on that. I could add that to the list and then maybe a report back to the committee in sometime next year. I think this is the last time I can blame Callum for these items, so I will find out what's happening and get it sent round.
Sorry, October 23rd, 2nd of October's meeting. Any observations on those items? Page 22 into page 23. Oh, okay. And then we look at the 30th of October meeting. I'm taking those are completed. Any observations on the bottom half of page 23 for November meeting? Completed. Since disciplines will be ongoing, that'll be quite a while before we see anything from that. And we are just the 1 person short for the from task and finish group. If there's nothing else, anybody got anything else for me? I think that brings the meeting to an end. Thank you very much for your time. And Saeed, Shahid, sorry, thank you for joining the meeting. We're all finished now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yes. My biggest problem is I speak to so many people of Turkish